With so much hype surrounding the new iPhone X coming out, it might be surprising to hear that people are actually talking about the next year's iPhone even though this one hasn't even been released yet at the time of this video. But what is more interesting is the rumor that was released recently by a pretty reliable Apple rumor gatherer, whatever you want to call him, who released a report that apparently the next generation of iPhones all will be missing Touch ID. No fingerprint sensor. Apple is doubling down on Face ID, which I just think is, oh my gosh, what is Apple doing? So first of all, Face ID, I've been annoyed by this since the beginning, the first time I've heard about it. And now I was saying, it wouldn't be that bad if they at least put in the fingerprint sensor as well. Then you could have both, best of both worlds. Sometimes Face ID might be better, other times Touch ID would be better, but at least you would have the choice. But of course, Apple went and instead of trying to get the technology to put a fingerprint sensor below the screen or just putting it on the back, they decided to get rid of it altogether and just kind of force it on people. And now it's coming out that depending on the sales or depending on how the public receives Face ID, they might just completely cut it out of the next iPhones altogether. To me, this is obviously horrible, horrible news because even though it sounds ridiculous, I thought removing the fingerprint sensor in the first place was ridiculous, but Apple still went and did it, and I would not be surprised if this is true. In fact, it kind of makes sense just because Apple has been so stupid lately. I mean, look, the iPhone 8 Plus, that's the one I got. It was finally an iPhone that had a lot of features that I wanted, wireless charging, and specifically, and so I went for it. And now that I'm hearing that the next one isn't even gonna have Touch ID, it's like, well, what the heck is the point of even getting it if next year I'm just gonna switch back to Android for good, for sure, if that isn't even in it. Now, to be fair, I don't know how well Face ID performs, but based on the demos they were showing, it was definitely not any faster and definitely not as convenient as Touch ID. No way. The demos they showed, it wasn't very convincing. So the fact that they're saying this is so much better doesn't really add up. And even from a security standpoint, it's worse. Yeah, it might be less likely that someone can unlock their phone with their face, but if someone wants to open your phone, all they have to do is grab your phone, hold it up to your face, and then it's unlocked. Whereas it's a lot harder to force someone and grab their hand and put their thumb over a fingerprint sensor. So it's not as secure, even though it's less likely that someone's gonna break in randomly by scanning it, because there wasn't really a chance that anyone was gonna do that with Touch ID in the first place. And besides ranting about Face ID itself, I've made a video already about that, let's just talk about what the heck Apple is thinking. I mean, why do they do this every single time? First, they remove the headphone jack. Nobody asked for that. Nobody likes it. Seriously, is there anyone who is happy about them removing the headphone jack? I bet not one single person, because it removed a feature. It didn't make anyone's life more convenient. It didn't add any functionality. And just like with Face ID, yeah, it adds a little bit of functionality if they kept the fingerprint sensor in, but at this point, at best, it cancels out, and at worst, it's an inferior feature, and they just removed something that people have gotten so used to for no real reason other than they couldn't figure out how to put the fingerprint sensor below the screen, so they just decided to ditch it altogether. And I think it's really, really funny that they're trying to just say, oh yeah, you know what? We're using courage to move on, and this is the future. Meanwhile, they were definitely trying to figure out how to put the fingerprint sensor under there. You know they were. So it's like, Apple, don't BS us with this and say that it was your vision from the beginning. You know that if you had the ability to put it under there, you would, and I bet if they can figure out how to do it really well, it'll be in the next phone. Especially considering that apparently some Android phone manufacturers have started to figure out how to put the Touch ID, or rather fingerprint sensor for Android, below a screen. And so we might actually see those in the next year for the next generation of Android phones. And it's apparently a little bit more difficult for iPhone to do it because of the 3D touch feature where you kind of press hard and it can detect when you apply more pressure and do functionality based on that. And that makes the screen thicker, so obviously it's a little bit more difficult to get that fingerprint sensor under there. So yeah, the new phones on Android side might not have this Face ID, but I don't think anyone's gonna care because they're so used to using a fingerprint sensor which works completely fine. No one's ever complained about a fingerprint sensor not working well enough. So the fact that they're gonna be able to have a full screen and the fingerprint sensor under there if they can figure it out, I think it's just gonna blow the iPhone out of the water. People are gonna start looking at that and be like, well, why couldn't Apple do that? This company was able to do it less than half a year later. Now, Apple's argument would be that Face ID is not just like the competition's facial recognition and that it's several years ahead of the curve in that respect, and I tend to agree. I'm not gonna deny that I'm sure Apple's Face ID works a lot better than the Face ID we've seen in the past, specifically because they have the whole bunch of infrared dots. They have a lot of special dedicated hardware in there besides just a regular, like even 3D camera that you might have seen on some Windows Hello security programs. So I don't doubt that they put a lot of work into it. It probably works a lot better than the other Face ID we've seen, but I don't think it's any better than a fingerprint sensor. Now, with all that being said, do I think that Face ID could get to a point where it's better than a fingerprint sensor? I think it's possible, but we're definitely a couple years down the road. It's gonna have to be faster because right now, looking at how it performs versus a fingerprint sensor, it's definitely slower than Touch ID. If they got it where it was as fast or faster than Touch ID, that'd be one point in that side of the corner, but they would also need to increase the field of vision so you could use Face ID in every situation where you would be able to use a fingerprint sensor. But to me, the main limitation of Face ID is just you can't use it all the time. You have to pick it up and turn the phone towards you. It just doesn't work at certain angles. If they can get it to work true 180 degrees, which I don't really see how they could really do that, it would just be a ridiculous field of view. They would have to maybe use multiple cameras or some crazy lensing or something. That's not gonna happen anytime soon. So the fact that they're removing this from all future iPhones just to me is so stupid. Yeah, it's kind of hinting that they want to put no bezels on all future iPhones, which is nice, but again, if it's at the cost of fingerprint sensor that they could easily put in there if they just kind of put an effort into it, then it's ridiculous. So to avoid just repeating myself over and over, I'm gonna wrap this video up and say that Apple, what the hell are you thinking? Come on, I finally was happy to buy an iPhone and now you're gonna ruin the next one. Like, what are you doing? At least finish Face ID before you release it to the point where it's faster or better than Touch ID, which it is not. And I could be completely wrong in your view. If you disagree, we can always talk about that down in the comments. But I don't know, I think there's a lot more people that agree with me than disagree. But again, we'll have to see, whatever, I'm keep saying the same thing. If you guys wanna keep watching, I'll put some other videos right here. You can just click on those. If you wanna subscribe, new videos Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. As usual, looking forward to hearing from you. Have a good one.